Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief. It's our weekly show about politics. I'm Marcus Molitzis. I'm here with Carrie Eleveld, and today we're going to be talking about the Republican presidential primary, how Donald Trump is sort of in a driver's seat right now, and is there anything anybody in that Republican field can do about it in the next however many months until Iowa, which is February, so not that many months. Things are coming up. So, Carrie, I know you've been very closely tracking the state of the race, looking at the polls and looking at sort of the various dynamics. What's it look like right now?
Trump. In a word, Trump.
That's been a great show. Thanks everybody for joining us this week. Catch us next week.
Okay. Disclaimer up front that I still think it's possible. Like, it's just, it's still Trump's to lose, right? I still think it's possible that, for instance, God, I can't believe we're back here. But anyway, I said we're back to Trump. And this is like, but I still believe it's possible that someone, and I don't think it's going to be Ron DeSantis, but someone could potentially catch fire in the early states and and start to make a race of this. But it's the probabilities just keep on declining, the potential for that. So just looking at the most recent Iowa poll from Ann Seltzer, who's like the Iowa guru pollster who, hits
the most accurate pollster in the biz, and she focuses on Iowa, so she knows Iowa, doesn't really do anything else, but she nails Iowa.
Right. She nails Iowa most of the time. I mean, every once in a while, she hits an outlier, and to her credit, she's not afraid to, actually, publish a poll that runs in contravention or, in conflict with every other pollster out there saying, oh, this is going to happen. She was the one who kind of alerted us to 2020 being a much closer race than anyone would have hoped between Biden and Trump. But in any case, her most recent poll, I think over the weekend, came out. It's an NBC, Des Moines Register, Mediacom poll. And she found Donald Trump in the state of Iowa, right? Nationally, he's leading by, some 40 points in national polls in the aggregate. And so, that hasn't shifted much over the past month or so. It's just in fact, for the most part, he just keeps growing his lead just a little bit point by point. But in Iowa, she has Donald Trump at 42%, Ron DeSantis at 19%, and then everybody else, Tim Scott's at 9%. Everybody else is in single digits. And 2/3 of, it's brutal. Like, Iowa wasn't as straightforward as a normal primary because it's a caucus. If you're at a precinct where, for instance, your candidate doesn't meet the threshold, you might have to go with your second choice. So second choice is...
Yeah, it's not a secret vote. It's like everybody's getting together. They're all arguing with each other, and these are Republicans, so that might actually be very interesting this year.
Second choice really does matter. Can matter in Iowa. Who do all the Trump supporters go to if he doesn't reach a threshold in a certain place? But he's still very much in command. 2/3 of his supporters in that poll said that they aren't looking at anybody else. They're, he's their guy. And so, roughly 30%, that means of the GOP electorate is already committed to Trump. And that's enough to win the Iowa caucus. 30% is enough to win it. So, the point is that he's sort of dominating in the early states. He's dominating nationally. While Seltzer was in the field with this poll, the Georgia indictment came down in the middle of, them doing this polling, and his support grew among the Iowa Republicans by 7 points between the beginning of the poll as they were conducting it and the end of the poll. So he actually got a bump from, in Iowa from the Georgia indictment coming down.
Crimes. Republicans subjectively love criminals.
We love criminals. We want them. He's our guy.
Another crime? I love him even more.
I know. Oh my gosh. He almost took those Georgia bastards, come on, this guy's anyway, he's criming all over the place and people love it. That's where the polling stands. And, I think I guess if I were to try to come up with a scenario where he might still lose, I'll say this.
Wait. Let's not get there yet. So we'll leave that for kind of the second half of the show. Let me
Okay,
dig
okay.
a little bit deeper. Where is Donald Trump's number specifically in all these pollings? Is he what, in the 40s, low 50s, in the 60s?
Yeah,
Where's he
well,
at?
yeah. So in this Iowa poll, he's in the 40s, and I think that that's pretty reminiscent of a lot of other. But in the national aggregate, right? He's like I think he's 50 some percent, like 55% or something. He's 40 points over. He's consistently 40 points over Ron DeSantis for the past, I don't know, month or two.
So, but let's just look at Donald Trump in, by himself. So he is universally well known.
Mm.
There's no doubt whether people like him or don't like him.
Mm-hmm.
And in this moment, he is getting about half of Republican support. That means that there is about half of the Republican Party, depending on the state, could vary a little bit, where they do not support him. Now, obviously, there's no consensus alternate to him. Quite to the contrary, it's a mishmash of
Right.
who knows what.
They're all over the place.
But he's not dominant in the way Joe Biden's dominant. You look at Joe Biden's polling; he's in the high 60s, low 70s against Marianne Williamson and against RFK Jr., who's not even.
Who's not a Democrat? Who's not a Democrat name only? Dino.
Yeah, and Marianne Williamson's not a serious candidate, but he's in. There's not an opening there, right? So that's what a dominant figure in a political party would look like, I think, in modern times. Yeah.
Hold on. I just pulled up the 538 aggregate just to check it out, just to see, if what percentage. And he had been polling at like,
who's he?
Trump. Sorry. He had been polling at like 53, 54%. He's got a little bit of a dip here all of a sudden. I don't know if that's like one poll. Hold on. I got to put on my readers because that's just how old I am. Who knows? It might be, the problem with 538 is you have to go through with a fine tooth comb and figure out who's a legitimate pollster and not. But in any case, it does look like maybe he's had just a little bit of a dip. What's happened, if that's true, what's happening is that DeSantis isn't really getting better. Vivek Ramaswamy is actually coming up in the national polls, which I have to tell you,
he's having his moment.
He's having his moment. He's having his moment well. at nearly 9%. He's having his moment, and Trump's going down a little bit. But let's just be clear about Vivek in the early state polling. He's basically nowhere. I mean, he's not running third in Iowa in most of the polls. I'm just, glancing through them right now. It's usually Scott who's running third. He is, Harris X. No, I don't trust them. No. But in the Seltzer poll, Ramaswamy is all the way down behind Pence, behind Christie at 4%. So
he's a business guy. He's got this little boomlet, which is, it's all relative, obviously, given those numbers. Yeah. And it turns out he's a 9/11 truther. Like, he thinks that 9/11 was an inside job. I mean, he's turned he's a Republican. Yeah. Like, this is what the Republican Party is today. It's a bunch of cranks and conspiracy theories, and there's nobody serious. And he even said he thinks Putin should win, that Russia should just annex parts of Ukraine. And he even said it like, I didn't pay attention to foreign policy until like last month, but now he's got a plan.
Yeah, now he's got a plan.
2 weeks into finally realizing that the world exists, he thinks he knows what to do with the world. I mean, these are not serious people.
Can we just review a recent thing? So he's a 9/11 truther now, right? And he said he was saying that, I don't know, maybe there were federal agents on those planes. And then like the world came down on him like a ton of bricks. And then he tells Semaphore that he was referring to January 6th, not 9/11, because the planes that hit the Twin Towers happened on January 6th, not 9/11. I mean, come on. What did he mean by wondering, quote unquote? I don't know how many quote unquote federal agents were on the planes that hit the Twin Towers. And now he's trying to claim he was talking about January 6th and not 9/11. I mean, that is really,
Yeah, it's
that's
the liberal media.
stunning.
The liberal media putting words in his mouth and making him say things to make him look bad and give him money to fight the liberal media. So back to the big picture.
Sorry.
Trump is sitting around, let's just say he's at 50% plus or minus a few points. The advantage he has, the disadvantage is obviously half the party is against him. And I'm not sensing, Carrie, that it's a very motivated against him. It's a small percentage of never Trumpers, and a lot of people are like, I wish he would go away. But no, but there's not like no groundswell movement to get him out of the party. Like that's not there. But there at least is clearly some rumbles. And there's an interesting poll, and we should probably get to it at some point, that where a third of Trump supporters don't believe what Trump says. And this is like the Trump movement in a nutshell. They're all cynical. They all think, they don't believe their families. They don't believe their religious leaders. They don't even believe conservative media figures. But they don't believe, they're nihilists, right? And this is very Trumpian. Just burn it all down. But they don't even believe Trump. And that I don't know. There's something there also that I think is an opening that somebody could exploit. But the problem is, his advantage is that the Republican primary system is different than the Democratic one. In the Democratic primary system, delegates are apportioned proportionate to the vote. So it's not an exact percentage to percentage, right? But generally speaking, let's say Biden got 60% of the vote and Bernie Sanders got 40% of the vote. And there's 10 delegates in that state. Biden would get 6 delegates. Bernie would get 4. And then that keeps the race close pretty much almost all the way to the very, very end, right? In the Republican primary system, and there's a handful of exceptions, but very few, the delegates are winner take all. That's how Trump won the nomination in 2016. He didn't win it he was getting like 35% of the vote back then. He was not where he is today, but he was winning 35% of the vote. And then you'd have somebody, with 30%, somebody else with 22% and 10%, and he get all the delegates. And so that's where it's an advantage, where he only needs 40. I mean, there's like 12 Republicans running. Let's say most of them are in single digits, but still, like, he probably needs like 38 to 40% of the vote, and he's probably going to sweep all the delegates on most of these states. That is his big, big, big advantage. So, but there's an opportunity, there's an opening there if the Republican field was actually running for president. And I think that's the underlying problem. Is anybody other than Chris Christie? I don't even know if Chris Christie's running for president. I think Chris Christie's running to take down Trump. Is anybody actually running for president other than Donald Trump?
Well, I think DeSantis actually was, but he's just terrible. I mean, Tim Scott may be vying for VP. Nikki Haley, may be vying for VP. Mike Pence, God bless him.
Oh my God, Mike Pence.
He just can't get away from the gallows treatment. No, I don't think Mike Pence is actually vying for VP, but Mike Pence doesn't have a chance in hell. So, but I actually think DeSantis was running to win and just was like a horrible, pathetic candidate. I mean, just did not have the national chops.
Right. I mean, aside from the fact that he's a robot and he's awkward and he's just an awful human being and he doesn't connect with people and he has no friends or allies. Like, aside from all those things, he came in defending Trump. Like, they've all thought. I guess the broader strategy was Trump can't possibly have staying power. So therefore, we're going to ingratiate ourselves with Trump supporters. And so when Trump flames out or gets indicted or dies because he ate too many Big Macs, whatever the like, they would be there being like, I'm the heir apparent to Donald Trump. I'm one of you. I thought that was doomed to disaster from day one, right? Because Trump had made very clear not only that he was running and he was serious about running for election, but that he saw it as an existential fight for his freedom. Because he wants to pardon himself if he's convicted of anything, and pardon all his buddies, which, as an aside, that's why the Georgia case is as important as it is, because it's outside of that pardon system. But that's why he's running. He's not running for America or to make America. No, he's running to protect his own ass, to save his own ass. And he made it very clear from the beginning that he was going to he was looking out for himself, that he needed to do this to save his own skin, and also his supporters decided that was also why they would back him, like, because it was to push back against those liberals like Mark Meadows and who have testified, all those liberal Republicans who have testified against him.
Yeah.
Literally every single person who's testified against him is a Republican, and most of them were in his inner circle. But sure, it's a liberal plot. So, Carrie, and to get a little bit into how you defeat somebody like Trump, the history of party primaries is full of examples of candidates who had their moment in the sun. And I'm not talking Vivek moment in the sun at 4%. I'm talking Howard Dean or
let's just remember
Fred Thompson or Jeb Bush.
Let's just remember that Vivek is actually pronounced Vivek. And the reason we know that for sure is because DeSantis' own, basic, de facto campaign manager told him to label Vivek the fake in the debate tomorrow.
They're trying to be
that's going to work. Because that's going to work.
And yeah, Vivek is the threat. That's who you need to train your fire on, not the guy who's got 50% of the vote, and you need to chip away at the front runner. So that gets to my point, though. That's almost great lead-in, because in a normal primary, what happens is you have a front runner. Elizabeth Warren also had that moment, and everybody attacks. Yeah. Everybody. That's why you don't want to peak too early, right?
That was sad. Hurt my heart as a Warren supporter.
Me too. When you peak too early, it gives too much opportunity for everybody else to pile on and to bring you down. And so this is a perfect case where you have 12 Republicans running, I don't know, like 15, there's a ton. And you have Donald Trump. If all of them had a steady drumbeat attacking Trump, some of Trump's supporters would be upset, but his core base is like 29% of the United States, I think, broader Republican Party.
No, it's really solid in the Republican Party. That's the problem. His core base I actually think his core base is closer to in the Republican Party is closer to like 2/3 of the Republican Party.
Am
I wrong?
I don't know, but regardless,
I mean,
if you're not going to run against him, you don't run for president, right? And he's not going to pick you as VP. He's going to pick somebody like Carrie Lake or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz. He's going to pick one of those people as his VP, right? So you're not really running for VP either, and not when you're in single digits. Like that's not how you make a case that you're valuable as a potential vice presidential candidate. So you're running against somebody who's popular. Everybody piles on, and you chip away at that, and you have a whole year to do that, right? They announced at the beginning of the year, you have a whole year, and my God, has Trump given them material? Yeah, he's given them all the material to do it, because it is Republicans who are testifying against Trump. You don't have to make common cause with the liberals or the establishment or the swamp or whatever, the deep state. It is his own people, and are you going to really argue that Trump's entire inner circle was deep state? He picked them.
Right.
They were his people. So there's a foundation and there's material, and you chip away. And you start, and it takes a while because people don't like to change their opinions. But a lot of times you don't need to change their minds. You just don't want them to vote. Maybe it'll be like, they're all crooks, right? This is a very easy out for people who are decide they don't want to support a candidate anymore. Oh, they're all crooks. And then they tap out. That's what you needed. But none of them did so, and still, it's not happening. In fact, Thursday's debate, I'm just watching. They're gonna one up themselves who can defend Donald Trump the most.
Before we get into Thursday's debate, because I would love to do that, but let me just say, I think part of the discrepancy we were just having between Trump supporters is at the moment the question of there's a question of Trump supporters, people who like Trump versus people who are diehard, I'm going to vote for him no matter what, right? And so there 2/3 of the 70% of the Republican Party basically believes the election was stolen from Trump. And you can say 70% of the Republican Party supports Trump. And there was this group of people who were kind of at the beginning of I've just come down to the idea, and you've written about this, that this has come down to sort of a cult-like devotion to Trump, right? That's what the primary is finally just getting down to. I mean, I had hoped that it would be something more than this, because I actually think Trump is truly the biggest threat to our democracy. So we're better off. We would be better off. There's a lot of people who say, oh, I want to run against Trump, he's the weakest candidate. I just don't want to. I would rather not roll the dice on democracy again. But here we are. And the people who were initially saying, well, you know, I loved Trump as president, I would happily have him be president again, but I'm just not sure he can win. And they were like DeSantis curious, and they were curious, they were supposedly open to somebody else. They've just finally come down to Trump, right? The people who were saying, I thought, you know, he would have electability issues, or I'm worried about his electability, have finally just come around to, you know what? And this is documented stuff. I'm not just making this up. I'll back it up in a second. Have finally just come around to, you know what? Trump's actually our strongest candidate. And we just don't think anyone can lose. You know, we just don't think any Republican can essentially lose against Joe Biden, because he's so old and doddering and, you know, such a terrible president and whatever. So like all these people who were supposedly worried about Trump's electability, who DeSantis could supposedly tap into if he had ever actually made the electability argument, which he never actually really made, they're just back down to Trump now. And, you know, I mean, so you have, let's just look at this, you know, you have Trump dominating in Iowa. You have Trump dominating in national polls, and just maybe Ramaswamy's having like a 2% bump or something. I don't know, but like only a legitimate cult could believe a guy who twice lost the popular vote, was defeated in 2020, doomed an entire slate of handpicked MAGA candidates in 2022, and is now haunted by 4 criminal indictments, is a shoo-in for 2024. And in fact, that's true. A Monmouth University poll last month found that 69% of Republicans said that Trump was either definitely the best candidate to beat Biden or probably the best candidate. Okay. So he is like the far and away choice of Republicans to beat Biden. And then there's a whole group of people now who are like, yeah, you know, there's no way Biden can win. I mean, listen to this. The New York Times talked to like 30 Iowa voters, okay? And they basically, to more than 30 of them, they may have talked to more than 30, but more than 30 Iowa voters actually said there's no way any Republican can lose to Biden. They've like drank the Fox Kool-Aid of he tripped over that sandbag and it's all over. And so, you know, so
Hunter
right,
Biden.
Hunter, you know,
people
whatever.
People care.
So just listen to a couple of these quotes. You might hear a dog in the background. That's actually mine. It's the neighbor's, but it's got a loud, high-pitched bark. But anyway, here, he just listened to a couple of these. I mean, I would hope anybody could beat Joe Biden at this point. That was a 52-year-old Republican in Iowa. And then here's another. It's just one gaffe after another, said one. And then here's another. What strength is a candidate? Does he have any? I mean, these are the quotes. Yeah. Of people, of Iowa Republicans just saying, there's no way Biden can win. Maybe it doesn't even matter who we choose. But by the way, also, Trump is the best candidate to, you know, and to me, it's like, in spite of themselves, the cult just came back together to drink more Kool-Aid. It's just another re-upping of Kool-Aid, you know.
So imagine when he was first indicted, if every Republican had said, this is just a continuation of Trump's losing ways. He lost, like you said, 16, the popular vote, 18, 20, 22. We've been losing during Trump, and we're going to keep losing. And he just got indicted, and his biggest allies have all turned on him. And how do you expect to win when we're running a crook against? If you made that case and everybody had argued that. So here's what happens, right? I think that poll that you cited where they said that Trump is the strongest, I think they're right, because nobody else in that field has shown strength.
Exactly.
How do you show strength? You fight, right? So if you're pushing hard and you're taking shots at Donald Trump based on stuff that, even like you said, at the time there were doubts. There were doubts about his electability. There were doubts about the indictment. If they fed into those doubts, punched hard, they would project the strength that they see in Donald Trump. They like Donald Trump because he doesn't back down, because he says what
Exactly.
he says. And then he's built this entire cult around him. And now they're all weak because remember early on when somebody asked Ron DeSantis if he would extradite Trump if he was indicted, right? And he said something like he would follow the law, and then he got, there's some pushback, and then the next day he like backed off. That's called
Oh yeah,
weakness.
he's like, I
Like
won't.
Trump.
Yeah, I won't extradite him from Florida. But Trump had already announced, by the way, at that point that he was going to turn himself in.
Yeah. So that is what weakness is. Trump will never back down, no matter what he says, no matter how stupid it is. You can ignore it, right? But
Right.
but DeSantis backed down, and that's the moment where he was just weak, and that
Right.
was the end of his campaign. Right, that moment, early
To
on.
your point, let me just say this. To your point, the only person who has really taken on Trump and really just said, look, this guy's a grifter, his family is grifters, he's bamboozled the American people, etc., is Chris Christie, right? Who's a brawler. And if you look at, I'm just looking at Chris Christie right now in recent polls in August, basically, okay? And Chris Christie, first of all, his negatives are sky high, and I mean higher than Trump's. So it's hard to see how he could ever win a national election or a national primary against Trump, but in New Hampshire, where he has devoted basically all of his energy as a candidate, he is running second in most polls. And for instance, like Echelon Insights, which is a mainstream, a Republican pollster, just found that Trump was at 34%, Christie's at 14%, Ramaswamy at 11%, and DeSantis is down to 9%. Okay, so some pollsters have DeSantis as second. I mean, but overall, Christie has made gains essentially
despite everybody hating him.
Despite everybody hating, he has like a ceiling of like, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but like, 12% there or something. He's like, but he has made gains despite. And if DeSantis had half the courage, or at least just like let Christie be the tip of the spear and just say, and then just like found a way to piggyback off that to say, look, I think, Trump was a great president, but what we really need now is, someone who doesn't have all this baggage. I mean, just look at his, all you have to say is look at his court schedule over the next year. He's supposed to be in court basically from the beginning of 2024, all the way potentially through the November election. How is someone like that going to meet the needs of the American people, of the Republican electorate that deserves to have the attention of a candidate when they're going to spend their entire year in court? I mean, if you had said something like that, or we're saying something like that, and early on, Ron DeSantis had an opening to do this, but now he just looks weak and pathetic, right? So anyway, just to prove your point, Christie has made gains.
Not only did they not attack him, they defended him, and they validated his narrative that this was a partisan liberal witch hunt and a deep state trying to take him down, right? So they actually gave him strength.
Yeah, they're disseminating his talking points as his competition.
So there's the CBS News YouGov poll, because we're talking about this Trump cult, and it's actually freaking fascinating, right? So YouGov asks, feel what they tell you is true, right? So does this person, do you feel that what this person tells you is true? And this is just among Trump voters. And do you feel that what religious leaders tell you is true? Only 42% of Trump voters think that their religious leaders tell them the truth. And there's been stories.
Are they counting Q?
Yeah. and there's
Kidding.
stories where a lot of Southern Baptist preachers are getting really disenchanted because they'll do the Sermon on the Mount, and then they will get actual parishioners come up and say, "Why are you disseminating those liberal talking points?" Like they finally realize that Jesus is actually liberal, and so instead of rethinking, well, I love Jesus, and what would Jesus do? And I'm gonna, I've made my identity around being evangelical and Jesus-y. No, they're like, nah, Jesus isn't relevant anymore for the future. And they've literally tossed him aside in favor of Donald Trump. That's so the next question is, do you feel what conservative media figures tell you is true? And only 56% of Trump voters believe that. And I think that's a reaction to Fox News no longer propagating the big lie because of the Dominion lawsuit and because of continued legal, lawsuits. And so they had to fire Tucker Carlson. And so they've actually turned on Fox News as not liberal enough. They asked, do you feel that what your friends and family tell you is true? Only 63% of Trump voters believe their friends and family. That's legit cult behavior. That's literally what cults do. Is they split their adherents from their network, their support network, friends and family, because as long as those people exist, they can pull them out of the cult. So they are systematically being cut off. And we've seen all the stories for years now about the uncle who's no longer, welcome at Thanksgiving dinner or quits showing up. Like we've seen this happen. And then the one that blew me away though is, do you feel what Donald Trump tells you is true? Only 71% of Trump voters believe that Donald Trump tells them the truth. They don't care. Yeah. That is nihilism at its very core. So
but he's got more. He's higher on that.
But he is the highest. Yeah.
On that totem pole. I mean, like he's got the most fealty or people who believe that what he's saying is true. They don't believe their friends and family. They don't believe the religious leaders. You know what I mean? Like they don't.
But you know what they believe?
Yeah.
A random meme on Twitter that says that a Jewish space laser destroyed, Lane.
Well, I mean, come on.
That's what they believe. That's what they believe.
At first blush, anyone could believe that, Marcos. At first blush, you just think about it and you're like, yeah, space lasers. Okay. I mean, who are these people anyway? God
That's what
bless.
They believe. That's
the space laser cult. Okay.
All right. So what would you, at this point, it actually might even be too late, but like, what would you do if you actually wanted to try to take down Donald Trump at this point?
Well, first of all, in the context, so there's what would you do and what might actually happen. So right.
What's going to happen? They're all going to defend Donald Trump.
No. Well, here's what I mean by that. Here's what I mean by that. I think it's still possible, and I was looking for it just before we came on. I think I saw something about how many evangelical voters in Iowa are still undecided. So I listen to a lot of podcasts done by campaign managers, not because they're always right about handicapping this political climate we're in. Like I listened to Hacks on Tap all the way up to the midterms telling me that Democrats were going to lose the midterms, right? This is like David Axelrod and his Republican buddy.
I didn't realize you were such a masochist.
Mike someone. Yeah. Oh, I know. I can't tell you how often I disagree with them, but they've both run campaigns and I haven't done that. Right. I listened to the Bulwark because like someone like Tim Miller, has run, he hasn't been a campaign manager, but he's been a spokesperson, director of communications on a campaign.
He's been in an inner circle where they make the decisions.
Pod Save America, Dan Pfeiffer, who was on Barack Obama's campaign. So these people have insights that I don't have. And one of the things that one of them said was, look, the Iowa Republicans, Iowa evangelicals break late and they break in mass. Okay. So they could at the last second. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it could at the last second, decide that their person is someone besides Trump. And that person, I think, is most likely, if that were to happen, not going to be Ron DeSantis. It would be Tim Scott, because he's a true believer. He actually knows how to campaign. He's very well liked. And, one of the big key evangelical leaders in Iowa, Bob Vanderplatz, is looking for basically anyone but Trump. And frankly, even though Governor Kim Reynolds hasn't said this, I think she's looking for anyone but Trump to endorse.
Yeah, she's been a DeSantis person, and that's not really working out so well.
She's been a DeSantis person, but not an announced DeSantis
Yeah.
person. And I think if she decided at the last second that her like throwing her weight behind Tim Scott or someone else could give them an extra boost, she would do it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, so it's just possible that maybe you get in a situation where someone like Tim Scott has a much better showing in Iowa, and we won't know until sort of the December January timeframe whether this is anywhere near possibly happening, but has a much better showing in Iowa than people originally thought based on evangelicals. And then it starts to upend the Trump inevitably Trump sort of idea. Okay, that is the only thing I see happening now. As to how I see them running against him, I mean, I think it's time to just sling the shit against the wall. Like, you can't, I mean, you can't continue to up and down defend Trump. You can find ways to question whether or not he really has what it takes at this point, given his legal entanglements, to really do justice to Republican voters. Shouldn't he have, like in the debate tomorrow, right? Shouldn't he have shown up and earned your vote? This is, right.
He's taking you for granted, and he's afraid to.
He's taking you for granted. I tell you what I think could actually work. The Trump that I know, that I knew and voted for in 2016 and 2020 never would have skipped a debate like this, because it's so low energy. Now, the truth is that he actually did.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't matter. His friend, his followers are so deluded they won't know. He did skip the pre-Iowa debate, and it actually hurt him. I actually think it hurt him in that 2016 race. But the point is that you throw something like, gosh, that the guy I knew never would have, scrapped a chance to take shots at us and to show that he was dominating the field. This is, like, in his own words, very low energy for him not to show up. I mean, something like that, where you're not like, oh, I hated Trump from the start. You've got to wrap it in this complimentary, I really like Trump. I voted for him. He was a great president. But really, just think about this now. He's going to be in court from January to I am here. I'm going to be campaigning. I'm going to be on the ground. I'm going to be at every debate. I'm going to, make it a signal of your devotion to the Republican electorate that you are going to show up everywhere, that you're going to mix it up with people, that you're going to answer their questions, that type of thing. I don't know, that's very generalized, but I think I think there's still like this 5 to 10% chance that maybe, but it's such a cult. I'm just like, I just was gobsmacked over the past week by how the cultists have gone back to Trump and rationalized their decision to go back to him. Sorry.
So, Carrie, I thought I was going to disagree with you on this strategy, but I'm just gonna mirror it, because I think it's pretty spot on. I mean, the first part is you got to have the whole field like start chipping away at Trump, like, and the chances of that happening are zero. Somebody's going to rise to this defend, right? But in an ideal world, everybody,
fake Vivek is gonna fake
everybody.
Vivek.
I mean, they'll be fighting over who's going to pardon him the fastest, right? I mean, that's literally that's going to be the debate. The debate: who's going to pardon him the most? And but the ideally, like you start really chipping away, and I think you've been on the Tim Scott train. I mean, I'm not saying you support him, but I'm saying, like, he's been the figure that you've, like, identified. Like, if anybody can break through. And the thing with Iowa and New Hampshire, the way that these primaries work is that everybody's obsessed with these national polls throughout the entire preseason. Let's just call it the preseason. And then Iowa happens, and the whole political press obsesses over this stupid freaking unrepresentative state in the middle of the country. And thankfully, the Democrats have finally bumped Iowa from the top of the calendar. Republicans haven't. And actually, honestly, Iowa sort of represents that. It is representative of the Republican Party. It is overwhelmingly white. It is overwhelmingly old, and which is actually why Seltzer it has easier time polling it, because you don't have to deal with like young people voting, responding, and people of color. Old white people, they'll answer the phone. So it's probably the easiest, like the Dakotas. Like there's some states that are probably easy to pull. Iowa's one of them. And so it is. So okay, let's say what happens. So Trump, let's say, the second choice matters. So Tim Scott doesn't need to be number 2 in the polls. He needs to be every non-Trump's second choice. And there may actually be precincts in some locations, maybe some of the higher educated, Republican precincts, suburban areas, where the Republicans are more anti-Trump and Trump doesn't actually hit the threshold.
Right.
So there is a possibility that Trump may come out of there with 60% of the delegates, and then Tim Scott, it's only at 40. And in the polls, he may be at 12. But after aggregate, he's like at 40. And suddenly you're like, whoa, Tim Scott's like a thing. And he probably isn't, but it seems like he's a thing. Right. And then everybody talks about Tim Scott. And then what happens is they're going to have the pre-New Hampshire debate, which is always in between Iowa and New Hampshire. And there's always 1 to 2 weeks apart. I don't know what the schedule looks like off the top of my head, but it's going to be 1 or 2 weeks apart. So you're going to have a debate there. And this is where a lot of things happen. This is where Obama screwed up his campaign against Hillary Clinton, because he beat her in Iowa, upended expectations. People are like, whoa. Then they get to this debate, and he's asked about whether he likes Hillary, and he said she's likable enough. And it just landed wrong, and people thought he was kind of an asshole. And suddenly Hillary wins New Hampshire. She flipped the polls because Obama looked like he was going to win. Had Obama won New Hampshire right there, primary would have been over. It would have been downhill from there, because you had South Carolina. So you never know. That debate is critically important. Stuff happens. Is Trump even going to show up? Right? Suddenly he looks like not that inevitable. If he doesn't show up, then you got something right there to build on. Now, again, in real life, what's going to happen is all these Republicans are going to attack Tim Scott because they're dumb. They don't understand. But let's just say that they don't. And so Tim Scott, again, notches a close second place in New Hampshire. Then he goes home. He goes home to South Carolina.
Well, I have to say, it looks like the Nevada Republican primary has supplanted.
Okay, and is it a caucus still, though? Because then you got a caucus.
I think so, a caucus, and so the fourth state to go is South Carolina, but South Carolina is an actual primary.
And what happens at that point is that 50%, 45 to 50% of I'm not feeling too great about Trump, now has somebody to look at. Now, he's a black man, and I think that costs him points in a Republican primary. But there is finally somebody who Republicans can look to and say, there's an alternative. The money will start flowing. All the anti-Trump, super PACs and stuff will start putting money into Tim Scott. He's actually a pleasant person. He's not. Yeah.
He likes people. He likes to talk to people.
He's not personally offensive. His views and policies are offensive. He, as a human being, is not. So that gives him an advantage. And then, again, Trump still got the advantage, and it's a winner take all. So it's, you can have Tim Scott getting 45% of the vote, and it's still not going to be enough, right? But then there's that where you start to get that 5 to 10% chance of something happening. So I think your plan works. I just sort of extended how that might look like if you look at state to state, what that might play out. But that's the plan.
And let me just back up what you're saying about being a second choice. The Des Moines Register Seltzer poll did ask about second choices, and Ron DeSantis was at 20% for people's second choice. So he was the highest up. Tim Scott was at 15% for people's second choice. Yeah, then it was Ramaswamy at 12 and Trump at 10. So Tim Scott is in the running for being one of the top second choicers, and could easily overtake Ron DeSantis by the time voting happens. I mean, could.
And there's thresholds. So if the second choice doesn't have enough people, then you go to the third choice. You just got to be in that. You got to be in that
mix. You got to be in that sort of top tier mix. Yeah.
Tim Scott's living in Iowa right now, and it actually plays to his other than being black. Like I think if he was white, the rest of the package actually might actually be quite the potent in a Republican primary. That's going to cost him a few votes.
I think
But
here's what I will say. If Tim Scott manages to have a better showing than people expect, and you're off to the races after Iowa, he's going to have to make a decision about whether he's really running for vice president or really running to be president. And he will at some point have to confront Donald Trump. He will at some point have to go straight at Donald Trump.
You can do it on abortion. You could do it on abortion. Like there's places to do it.
Yeah, there's places to do it. I mean, it's just he has to make that decision. And I think that's what people are waiting to see too about him is kind of like, are you really running for vice president? Or are you really running for president? And if DeSantis flames out, there's going to be a boatload of really, really wealthy people looking to fund someone else who, God, they desperately hope can take down Trump. And that would be already the capitalists. Oh, they are.
You've been writing about it. They already pulled their money. Now they're just looking about where if there's anybody they can send it to. Yeah.
Yeah. But there might be more.
Yeah. So we're pretty much out of time, Carrie, but we got through it all. We got through it. I like our plan. It's a viable plan. It doesn't have 5 to 10% is better than no chance in hell of passing, but it's just a little bit better than no chance in hell, but there is an opening, and it would actually make for a far more interesting Republican primary for sure.
Yeah,
because in the context of Iowa and New Hampshire, you're going to start getting those preliminary court dates as well. So that stuff is going to intrude in ways that we actually can't predict right now. And as much as Republicans love crime, if somebody makes the case that this is actually hurting their general election chances because the American electorate does not like crime, and no, the American electorate does not care about Hunter Biden. And if you actually care about crimes, well, Donald Trump's crimes are relevant and Hunter Biden's are not.
Right.
If you start, I mean, so but you're also right that they live in that bubble. They've convinced themselves that Joe Biden can't string 2 sentences together. I mean, it's all of a piece, right? It's all part of that cult and the media, their media bubble and all. So, but it's definitely gonna be interesting. And you know what I'd like to do, Carrie? Maybe
can I just add something? It's gonna be interesting to see how Trump tries to navigate looking like the alpha male while he's doing things like surrendering, to Fani Willis at the Atlanta court, or has to potentially sit through a trial. I don't think the Georgia case is going to get to trial before 2024, but the federal case, the Jack Smith case about January 6th might get to trial before then. And there won't be cameras in there, but there's a question of like, how does he look? Because every day he's like, he's powerless essentially.
And
how do you navigate that?
And all the reports of his court dates where he's actually been in court have been very vicious in his demeanor. He's not very good at hiding. He doesn't have a poker face.
No.
Like when he's having a bad day, we know he's having a bad day. And like after that Oklahoma rally, right, where nobody showed up during COVID times, then he showed like his makeup's all over his shirt, his face is all orange and droopy, and so once we have video of his courtroom appearances where his actual freedom is at stake, I mean, there may be some pretty striking images that smart operatives would be able to use to show that he's actually not the alpha male that he claims to be. So it'll be interesting. Carrie, I don't know what you think. Maybe next week we can talk about Joe Biden, because this whole idea, I like this that you brought up this notion that they've convinced themselves that Joe Biden can't string 2 sentences together and is a weak candidate. And I actually would like us to explore what kind of candidate he actually would be, because it's actually, nobody's talking about Joe Biden. And I know Joe Biden, everyone wants to go to sleep thinking about Joe Biden, but actually it's actually very relevant to what this, obviously to what we're going to be talking about next year. And
I'll say this, despite what MAGA thinks, he won't be an indicted candidate. So, I mean, there's that.
The bar is set. Are you indicted or not? Carrie, thank you so much for joining me this week. It's always been a pleasure. Thanks, Walter, for producing the show. Thanks, everybody who helps behind the scenes, like Paul. And thank you, the viewer, listener, reader, for being part of Daily Kos, being part of this movement to save our American democracy. We could not do it without you. Please like, recommend, share, let people know about everything that we do, the Daily Kos, and and this podcast and help us build this movement, because we're going to need all hands on deck next year to save our democracy, and maybe even like make it so much better. If you can hold
Make
the
it
Senate
so
and
much better. It's
improve,
possible.
get the House. Yeah, I mean, we're not a lot of opportunities, but we're so close to having that filibuster-proof Senate majority, and that would change everything. Puerto Rico statehood, DC statehood, like so many things. So you're all part of that movement. Thank you so much for joining us. Love you so much. Catch you all next week. Bye-bye.